Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Friends, I know I have mentioned it before, but one of my favorite things, one of the greatest things about doing this podcast and having a global outreach like I do with the D-Rate the Hate podcast is all of the interesting and just incredible people I get to meet that are out there trying to better the world in which we live. So naturally, when I was approached by a couple from South Africa wanting to be on the D-Rate the Hate podcast to talk about the shape of emotion, I said to myself, wow, I talk about emotions all the time and I didn't even know emotions had a shape. But I soon learned that emotions do have a shape and emotions matter, really, as they talk about all the time in their podcast as they are trying to do what we are trying to do, and that's better the world in which we live. With that, I don't need to say a whole lot more that they don't talk about in this great conversation. So welcome to the D-Rate the Hate podcast, Matthew and Chantal from Fifth Place. Here we go. Matthew and Chantal, thank you for joining the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I greatly appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here, and looking forward to having this conversation. So thanks for the opportunity.
When I first became familiar with Fifth Place, I saw the two of you on the cover of your artwork. You had these huge smiles, and you just really, I could tell right away, you're two people that are really trying to better the world. Here at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, we're all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. It very much coincides with the mission that you guys have going on with Fifth Place and all the additional work that you're doing. So tell me a little bit about how this journey started. I know it was about 5 years ago. Get into that. Just start with where this journey into this mental fitness thing started for the two of you.
So in 2017, we were working in what we call the under-resourced school space. And just to contextualize what that means here in South Africa, so we're a developing country, and under-resourced in this context means a space where people typically live on less than $2 a day. And it's a place that's full of poverty, full of violence, and full of trauma. And we looked at this space, and we saw that there was a great need to attend to the trauma in the children, because when you're in a traumatized state, everything that's not essential to survival is shut down by your body, and that includes your brain. And so we thought, well, if we really want to have a go at making education work, because typically in that kind of context, education is viewed as the way out of my situation, we said, well, let's have a look at what can we do about it. And we set ourselves 3 goals. The first goal was to can we develop something that works with children as well as adults, because children process emotion differently to adults. The second goal was we need to make whatever we end up doing, and we didn't even know if we could yet, work in groups as well as individually, because there's lots and lots of interventions that work for one-on-one sort of situations, one-on-one counseling, coaching, whatever. But children are in groups, so we thought, well, let's see, can we make something for the group space? Because also there's not enough qualified professionals to attend to the problem. Here in South Africa, we have 23 registered psychologists for every 100,000 people.
Oh boy. It's kind of lopsided.
Yes, that's a very generative statistic. Very generous statistic.
And then the last goal was because South Africa has a legacy of trauma in terms of apartheid and colonialism and, slavery, as well as we said, we just really want to draw on whatever inspiration we can from this context, not sort of import something. And we then went on this journey, and 10 months later, we popped up at the other side with this process called Shape of Emotion, which is a way of regulating your emotions. So what that meant is that we could work with children and adults in groups using Shape of Emotion to help them down-regulate specifically the stress, anxiety, and other trauma-related emotional states.
The thing, though, was that once we'd actually developed this process and we'd taken it back into the school space, all our dreams of working in this space were actually scuppered because the teachers were saying, this is amazing, this works, but actually we have no capacity to do any more than what we're doing already. We don't have time, the way that the whole curriculum is structured, we really just can't do it. So we were like, okay, where else shall we go with this? And then we turned our attention on other demographics, other people, and went out and really tried to teach the process and then engage others with the process across the board. So we worked with unemployed youth in a place called Kliptown, which is also a very poor area in Soweto. We worked with people with albinism. We worked with high school students. We worked with teachers that come from sort of rural, early childhood development areas. We worked in the corporate space. And then, of course, COVID came along.
Yep.
And we then had to pivot because we obviously couldn't do everything face-to-face. We were about to launch what we call our outsourced model, because in the schools, they didn't want to do it themselves. We said, okay, let's see if we can do something on an outsourced basis and then teach the social workers that work in these schools, some of the schools, how to use it in their group sessions. But COVID came along, there wasn't any funding, and obviously we weren't able to do any of that. And we then pivoted and did our work online, and we had been doing it online in what is called an emotional fitness class. And we say that in emotional fitness class is like yoga for your emotions. It's a guided class that we do because the process is mindfulness as well as bodyfulness based. And we basically offered it online and just got lots of global interest. We suddenly were talking to a global audience, not just a South African audience.
Nice.
In this particular instance. But also what we were doing during this time is we were realizing that how we were languaging what we were talking about in terms of the process called Shape of Emotion was really not landing. It certainly wasn't landing in our country. We tend to be behind the curve when it comes to attending to mental and emotional wellness. And people were just not connecting with it. So we did a lot of constantly and always are doing lots and lots of research. And we basically came upon what we have, which is a framework and a model for building emotional fitness, which stands on 4 pillars. And we've also broken down the concept called emotional fitness as well.
Okay.
So, yes, but the 5 pillars, I'll let Matthew talk about the 5 pillars because this isn't an event. Emotional fitness is a little bit like physical fitness. And
it's an ongoing process.
Yes, exactly. You're not going to do it by having one meditative session
sure.
Or what have you. It's basically a choice and a lifestyle.
All right. So before we get into those 5 pillars, so just for me real quick, the Shape of Emotion is the name of your program, correct? And how did that, I guess, how did that Shape of Emotion, what is, if you had to define Shape of Emotion, what is that? And then we can get into those 5 pillars.
No, cool. So Shape of Emotion is the process that you use to regulate the emotional state. And it's quite an interesting thing because a lot of models of emotion regulation focus on the negative emotions, and shape of emotion can work with both negative and positive emotions. So you down regulate, in other words, you dial down the intensity of the negative emotions, and you can dial up the intensity of what we call supportive or positive emotions. And it's a 4-step process that we developed. The 4 steps are: the first step is to feel the emotion that you want to work with. The second step is to find where in your body you are feeling it, because with some awareness, and this is why Chantal speaks about mindfulness and bodyfulness based, is that with practice, because it's a skill, you do get better at these steps, but a particular emotion will be some localized to a particular part of your body. And that emotion, I mean, there's no rule. It's not like anger is always, in my chest, or anxiety is always in my stomach. And then the third step, and this is why it's called shape of emotion, is to observe what the emotion looks like. So we discovered that every instance of an emotion has particular characteristics. These characteristics are unique to that emotion in that moment. Which is to say, if we use anger as an example, that if I feel angry today and I observe what it looks like, the anger that I feel tomorrow or next week has a high probability of looking different and even showing up in a different part of my body. And then the fourth step, is we use what's called touch points. And these touch points are widely known as acupressure points, and they are derived from traditional Chinese medicine.
Okay.
And they're all over the body, but we use ones on the arms, upper body, face, and hands. And one of the things that happens when you stimulate these points is that it invokes or brings online, if that's the right terminology, what accesses the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is really what you want to be coming online, because it down regulates, it helps you calm down. It sends signals to the brain to say, hey, release calming hormones and chemicals. And so if you are a very small child and you don't have a lot of language skill, or you don't understand it, we teach just the touch point part so that children can learn to self-regulate. Because part of our sort of perspective is that my emotions are my emotions and my responsibility to manage, irrespective of the stimulus behind it, whether you did something, but the way that I feel, it's up to me.
It's your responsibility. It's always your responsibility to control how you react to your emotions. It's something I talk about all the time on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. So that's very important. So I'm very interested in this. I guess
parasympathetic. And what happens is when you use the touch points, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system and it calms you down.
Parasympathetic. Okay, I got it now. Yep. Parasympathetic nervous system. Nice. Okay.
Because when we get stressed or anxious or uptight, usually that invokes the sympathetic nervous system, which brings us or puts us into that fight, flight, or freeze response. And the parasympathetic is sort of known as the rest and digest. So that's really what you want to have more of, or you want to sort of balance, because there's lots of things that can put you into that, fight, flight response or freeze response.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially little children who, they don't understand their emotions. You can't really explain it to them. And some adults too. I mean, let's face it, there's plenty of them out there as well. But yeah, children more specifically, yeah, they can't grasp it. It's hard to speak to them in logical terms, and they can't figure it out. So very interested in finding more out or about this parasympathetic nervous system and how that works. More than that, how does that translate online, and how do you teach people online? You know, I obviously I get the first four steps. You know, the feel the emotion. Where is that emotion coming from, or where is it located in the body? What does that emotion look like? But when it really comes down to that fourth step, using the touch points, how does that translate online? Because I know a lot of the work you're doing now, especially in the age of COVID, and then the fact that you've got a global outreach now, how does that translate online?
So what we do when we do the process, and we are guiding people through the process, or have it videoed or recorded, we actually show the touch points beforehand. So we say, these are what the touch points look like. I'm going to take you through them. You can just follow on, yourself, just so that your body has a felt sense of where they are, because during the process, we're going to ask you to close your eyes or lower your gaze. Obviously, at any time you can open them if you've sort of lost your way, and you can see where we are. But we will take you through those touch points first, and that's what we do. We just show them where the touch points are, and it's quite useful to do that, because in the past, when we haven't done that first, even though we're guiding everybody through the touch points, sometimes people hear things differently. You know, when your eyes are closed and you hear somebody saying, take your hand, because we use the tips of our fingers. We say, take your hand to the first touch point, which is where the eyebrow meets the nose. Sometimes people are going like this, because they hear nose, and then they do this. Yep. Or we've said, so we very clearly show, go to the side of the eye and touch the side of the eye. Sometimes they're sitting, touching their temple. So beforehand, we do explain exactly where those touch points are. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if some of them aren't touched properly, because you are going to find there will be those that are touched properly. And it doesn't require that every single one needs to be touched in the perfect order and everyone touched, at the same time. It's fine if some are sort of missed out. In fact, we say we do the touch points, we clasp on the hand, and some people will say to us, how am I going to do this process if I'm sitting in a meeting, and I'm starting to feel myself getting very anxious or angry? What do I do? And we just say to them, under the desk, under the table, just do these touch points. You don't have to do anything. This
is not an all or nothing thing. It's yes. You just
just do the touch points on the hand. And I mean, it's obviously not as good as doing everything, but that in itself will help with the process. So you're not expected to do everything the same and the whole thing every time. I mean, obviously it is better to do that, but there are ways of doing it so that you can get some relief, if not the full package.
Very nice. All right. No, that's great. So let's then talk about the 5 pillars of your is it the 5 pillars of emotion, or five pillars of emotion? Is that right?
The 5 pillars of emotional fitness.
5 pillars of emotional fitness.
Yes.
So there's no particular order. So it's thinking, moving, nourishing, relating, and feeling.
Okay.
And these evolved really out of doing Shape of Emotion and observing some of the changes, but then also just looking at it more holistically and realizing that in much the same way that we are a system, we're a mind-body system, not a mind and a body, that, if I'm not getting enough sleep, or if I'm eating rubbish food, or not doing enough exercise, it doesn't matter how good Shape of Emotion is, and it's very good, it's going to be counteracted by the impact of those particular pillars. And so we really encourage people to strive for balance and consistency, but it's not a thing that is a do or die or all or nothing. Really, it's just about being gentle, aware. If you fall off the wagon or you forget or whatever, just come back, because it's about the consistency and the coming back. And then you sort of encourage to be aware of, what am I putting into my body food-wise? What am I putting into my mind space? What am I watching? Am I watching news? Am I getting riled up by social media? because, then again, that's counterintuitive, because we want to try and manage and be more aware of these particular sort of pillars.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, what we ingest, what we take in, what we think, what we say about ourselves, all those things, every bit of it definitely plays a large part in, I would say, in our emotional fitness, in our emotional well-being. Mindset matters so much, and our environment and how we react to our environment always plays a huge part in that. And I think a lot of people discount that in their everyday lives, and then they wonder, why am I so angry all the time? Why am I tired? Why am I sick? Why am I angry? And I think they really do discount how much all those different things play into it. So my next question, what is the difference between emotions and feelings? I know that's something that you guys talk about on your podcast. You talk about it on your website. And I think it's easy to conflate the two, get the two mixed up. Talk to me about the difference between feelings and emotions.
Okay, so there's a qualification here. This is our perspective on how we see the difference.
Okay.
So it may not necessarily be someone else's perspective, but it's what we've kind of discovered. And Chantal can talk a little bit more into some of the views around emotion. So there's the general theory of emotion. And one of the things it says is that you're supposed to be able to read people's facial expressions and then decipher what they're feeling. And that is complete nonsense as far as we're concerned, because you can't. And certainly what we've discovered through working with Shape of Emotion is that, someone can be very stoic looking and then have a wild party going on inside and you wouldn't know anything.
Okay.
So sorry but I'll come back to the question. So from our perspective, the emotion is really sort of the label, if you like, that points to the direction, or points you in the direction of where you are having the felt or the feeling experience in your body. And it's useful because sometimes, we need language. I mean, here we're talking English and we need some common understanding. So if we try to understand each other and what we're saying, we need those labels. But from our perspective, we just use the label as the beginning point or the entry point to where I am feeling the emotion. So the feeling is the felt sense and the emotion is the label of that felt sense. And to sort of give you an example that maybe makes it easier to understand. So the feeling is butterflies in my stomach. That's the feeling.
Okay.
But the label could be anxiety. The feeling is butterflies in my stomach, but the label could be nervousness. The feeling is, again, butterflies in my stomach, but actually I might be pregnant if I'm a woman. So the perspective really is that because people are sort of...
I just want to say that not all feelings are emotions. So just because there's a somatic event that's happening in your body doesn't necessarily mean that it is an emotion. And so that there is a distinction, and we can get it wrong. So we can think that what we feel, so lots of people get confused between things like anxiety and depression. You can, as Matthew was explaining, I've got butterflies in my stomach. I'm feeling like, gosh, am I feeling a bit nervous? But actually I found, I'm pregnant and I'm starting to feel, it's actually got nothing to do with an emotion. It's actually a physiological thing. So in our instance, the emotion the feeling will talk to the emotion. That's where we work with, but we also can work with feelings that are pain, that are not necessarily emotion specific. So we have been able to work as well with pain in the body, not just what we call as painful emotions as well. So
the easiest way to explain that one is a headache. I mean, headache is a good example. It's a localized feeling. So it's localized to your head. And You can, so we're feeling the pain in terms of shape of emotion. So step 1 is feel it. Step 2 is find it. Well, it's in my head. And then step 3 is you observe, and you can actually observe what this headache looks like. And then you can do shape of emotion, and the headache can and will generally go away.
Sure. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you hear, I think probably anybody who's had children or certainly been a supervisor in a work setting or things like that, when somebody, okay, this child is getting on my nerves, they're doing things, it's manifesting itself on my body as a headache, and it's not as if you've actually been hit in the head, but the stress involved with that interaction with that child has now manifested itself as a headache, or it just drains you physically. And it's not like you've gone out and run a mile, but you feel like you have just run a marathon. So yeah, those feelings manifest themselves as a physical part of what's going on with your body.
Perfect. Yes. Exactly.
No, that makes that makes perfect sense. And being able to recognize that is probably the first step in being able to control that. Am I right?
Yes. And we we prefer to use the word manage rather than control, just in the sense of control sort of implies some kind of dominion over, and we can't. All we can do is guide, because emotions, they don't want to be controlled.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't play nice if you try and kind of squash them into a box kind of thing.
Okay.
Well, often when emotions are controlled, then they usually are stuffed away. So many of us have been taught that we mustn't show our emotions. We certainly mustn't show our difficult emotions. And so we must remain stoic, or we must just stuff them down and find other ways of dealing with how we feel. So, that control then can actually become, it can become almost
counterproductive.
Very much counterproductive, and actually can make us ill. Things like ulcers can form as a result of not showing or not releasing anxiety and nervousness and stress. That's one thing, but a whole lot of other things can happen as well as a result of not knowing how to regulate, how to express, and how to relieve oneself and allow to let go these difficult emotions that we feel. And we all feel them. We are human, and we are meant to feel them. We're just not meant to hold on to them.
So we want to manage rather than control our emotions. I like it. Makes sense. All right. So let's talk real quick as we round out this conversation. Talk about how you use your Fifth Place podcast. First of all, tell the DTH listeners what the significance is with the name Fifth Place, and then talk about how you use your podcast to help others around the world to manage those emotions and really make the world a better place.
Thank you. So just give you some background into why we call ourselves Fifth Place, because that's often a curiosity, like why Fifth Place? So Matthew originally read a book by a gentleman, and it's an old book. It was actually published in the 80s by Ray Oldenburg, and it was called The Great Good Place. And in this book, he is actually talking about three places. The first place, which is about home. It's based in America. So he talks about the first place, which is home, the second place, which is work, and the third place is the gathering, a place where people would gather as a community in parks, in coffee shops, recreation centers. And he was really saying that America had lost that, going to the suburbs, getting away from being able to be more community-based. They had lost being able to gather in. He was sort of, waving the flag of the third place, and that place of community and connectedness. So when we looked at it, we said, okay, well, that's 1, 2, 3. Fourth place, we believe that in the sort of online tech space was that place of chat rooms, social media, places that people come and gather in the social media and online space. So we're going to take fifth place. And fifth place for us is the place of connectedness, community, possibility, well-being, and equality. And our dream is that there will be a fifth place on every corner, but the first place that there's a fifth place is in ourselves.
Okay. Very nice.
So that's the background to fifth place.
No, it's a great story. I mean, it's a very, very thoughtful title. It's very nice. I like it. So how are you using the Fifth Place podcast, Matthew and Chantal? How are you using that Fifth Place podcast to make the world a better place?
So our podcast, which we started this year, is called Emotions Matter Really. So in other words, they really do matter. And the title of the podcast, Emotions Matter Really, comes from a talk that we would often do, educating people about this thing called emotions. And what we do in our podcast is we talk to this very broad base of emotional fitness, this broad base of emotional wellness, starting off with what emotions are, why it's important to manage them, and what happens when we don't. We talk about what happens when we do things, when we try to manage our emotions in unresourceful ways. And we look at all the other pillars and how all other things fit into this concept of building emotional fitness. So sleep, concepts of things like freedom. We look at how community is important, how it's important to relate with others. We have interviews also with people that are like-minded, that also are in this particular space as well of emotional and mental well-being. We talk to people in this space as well. We talk about current research. We talk about myths, scientific myths, for example, like the triune brain, which have sort of stood the test of time, and people still talk about the reptilian and the limbic and the rational brain, which is actually, a myth, and it isn't real. So we talk about those things and try and correct and bring people back to what is true and real. But we also talk about it from a place of lived experience. So we engage in a conversation with ourselves, talk about our own lives, talk about our lived experience, talk about how we've managed to come from dark places. Matthew did a podcast the other day around suicide. It was Suicide Prevention Week, and he spoke about his own experience when he was younger of suicide ideation and attempts. And so we use also lived experience. And we talk also from the perspective of Africa, but also the relating into the world as a whole, because even though we come from a very different continent, a very different place, we all kind of battling with similar feelings and difficult emotions. And so to normalize how we all are, even though sometimes we feel that we are very different.
Very good. We may be on different continents, but we're all still human beings, and we may look different, we may sound different, we may have different backgrounds and different upbringings, but ultimately we're all human beings, and there's a lot of commonalities in how we operate just naturally. So that's a beautiful thing. I'm very glad that you guys are doing what you're doing. I encourage people to check out the website, and you can find all the information that you need in those show notes.
So there's something else Chantal just reminded me or us that we can share with you and with the people who are listening. If they want to experience Shape of Emotion and an emotional fitness class, we have an online offering that is called an emotional fitness class, and it's the 3 parts, which is effectively you do what we call the dial down. So you can take a difficult emotion, we do a dial up, so you can take a positive emotion, make that feel more. And then there's a thing called seeding a quality, which is really about really connecting to something you want to see more of in the world. And we have it available for free.
Very nice.
Anybody can go and try it out and use it and get benefit from it, and then hopefully engage with us more. And who knows where the possibilities may go if that's the thing.
So you can share the link
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely check out the link. And what is that link?
It's emotionalfitnessclass, one word, .com.
Okay. Emotionalfitnessclass.com.
Yes.
All right, very good. Well, they will definitely the listeners will definitely find that in the show notes, emotionalfitnessclass.com.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time, appreciate you and the space.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.